We've had this vaccine for some 12 months now. They say, I think it's January 2021 when the trial is over, and I simply want to wait for then to see if this vaccine is indeed safe. Mm-hmm. Also, I've worked all throughout the pandemic on the front line on ambulance.
So you're an NHS worker. So are you unjabbed completely, John?
I am unjabbed completely.
And what would you do then if they said, which may happen in days, we might get this announcement that any frontline NHS worker, of which you are one, will have to have a jab or no job or no frontline job. What would you say to that?
I would be forced to have it. There's no other way. I can't go without my livelihood.
Yeah.
I think this is an absolute travesty. I think it's criminal. And I cannot understand in this modern day and age how we can get away with forcing vaccines.
He didn't even seem to be... David Miller didn't seem to be at all perturbed by that point that you've just... I put specifically that to him, the idea of a career or a livelihood being lost unless you had a government mandated procedure. He didn't cut any ice with him, as you heard, John. He just simply said, no, sorry, that's the way it has to be. Have another listen to what he said. Let's just remind ourselves what David Miller said not 10 minutes ago.
I think they have to be removed from frontline service. Look, it's really not very complicated thing, is it? If we're going to keep COVID under control, we can only keep COVID under control by having as far as we can, an environment in which those who work have been protected against COVID.
There it is, John.
There's no justification for forcing it onto people when we know now that it doesn't prevent transmission. I would have reluctantly had it if it had prevented transmission to my patients, but I know now that it doesn't do that. So I'm happy to not have it. Totally happy to not have it.
He said, as the government often say, John, that it vastly reduces your chances of having a very bad case of COVID, and that's evidenced in the lack of people who are now hospitalised compared to the amount of people that were hospitalised when the pandemic began, or sort of at its peak.
I'm not sure about the data of how many people who haven't had it have been severely ill and who have had it who have been severely ill. I can't tell you that, unfortunately. All I know, as a personal point of view, as a 41-year-old man who looks after himself really well, I've been in this for the whole of the 2 years of the pandemic, and I've had a couple of sniffles, that's it. I've had multiple patients who've had COVID with my little paper mask on that allegedly protects me, but we know the efficacy of the paper masks as well. I don't believe I haven't had it. I haven't had an antibody test, unfortunately. Maybe if I have an antibody test, maybe that could be a way forward.
I wondered that about the antibody test. What about your other colleagues, John? I'm guessing you're in a minority.
There's about 6 or 7 of us who haven't had it, and it's not for conspiratorial reasons. It's safety, efficacy. We just want to know if it's safe or not. Our union Unison are not in support of mandatory vaccines, and my service is not in support of it. However, they will have to enforce it if the government say you've got to have them.
Yeah. John, thank you. It's a very honest account from a frontline paramedic. He's not had it. Half a dozen other colleagues haven't had it either. But he will have to sign up for that if it came to that point. Just to address Maggie's problem about David Miller's statement that the vaccine reduces transmission and gives immunity. I think it was... I did have another text on this one as well, Morse code. You said you would assume being vaccinated means you're less likely to transmit the virus as bad, yet we see no evidence of this, just hearsay from very ideological groups of people like Sage. Again, I think the government, take it or leave it, but I think the government answer to that is, well, look how fewer people are in hospital in compared to, we've got 50,000 cases a day or whatever it is. That's not translating into mass hospitalizations in the same way it would have been. That, I believe, would be their evidence on this one. Kev in Warwick says, Collins, you always know something bad is coming when they start with your surname. You bottled it regards the vaccine. Pressure from somewhere changed your principle, bordering a woke. Well, I've never known anybody be called a woke because they had the vaccination. I mean, that would make Nigel Farage woke. Richard Tice and various other people who I don't think you would ever call woke. I'm not against the vaccination. I think you're mistaking me, Kev, for somebody who might be. I was always hesitant about the vaccination, as I think any human being would be. I was working on the basis that I'm a pretty healthy person. I know that's not how a virus works. And, you know, all of the mates I've had that have had COVID, 3 of them really rather badly, are all very, very healthy people. I mean, over and above healthy in terms of being fit and super fit and doing multiple sports and all the rest of it. And by the way, people can change their mind. What I haven't changed my mind on is the idea that you can make this government directed. Simon in Stirling, what are you thinking, Simon?
Oh, hi, Ian.
Hi.
I'm instinctively a libertarian. Instinctively, I don't agree or don't want to agree with the government telling me what I will or will not do or what I will put in my body. But with this instance, we're in a different place than we've ever been before. And the example I would give you is in the 1930s, when there was a rise of Nazi Germany, there was conscription introduced in this country. Now, I'm quite sure there are plenty of people that would rather not have joined the army, not put on a uniform, not pick up a gun, and not have to walk into a battlefield and risk having their head shot off. But they had no choice.
Yeah.
The government took the view this is for the overwhelming good of the country that we have to go to war to protect us from Nazi Germany, and whether you like it or not, this is what is going to happen. Now, obviously, the quantum of the risk is not the same as the Second World War, but the principle is the same. We are facing a pandemic which is killing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. And I think, given on the medical evidence there is, it is far better for the national interest that we mitigate any risk by having people being forced, no job in the NHS, because that is for the overriding national benefit. I think the principle's the same as we had, say, with conscription.
It's a good, I think it's a good analogy. But I think from my perspective, Simon, I come back to that. You know, I said at the beginning, even if every epidemiologist and every doctor or nurse stood in a room and said to me, no, this really does work, it's for the good, and I promise you, you know, people who've been jabbed, they don't pass this on, and even if they get it, they get a milder case of it, they don't pass it on with such virulence in the same kind. Even if all that was the case, we're still left with this very uncomfortable question of a government-mandated medical procedure.
I think you're right. But my profession is, I work in finance, I work in asset management. So my whole day job is balancing risk and return.
Yep.
And I think that's the way any rational government has to do it as well.
Sure.
I'm sure a government, at least not a Conservative government, would like to be going out saying we are going to introduce legislation potentially to force people to have needles stuck in their arms, injected with a drug, and they will have effectively no say on that, because they will have no job, they will have no mortgage, and the house will be repossessed if they don't. We'll deprive them of their livelihood if they don't. No government wants to do that, but I think any responsible government has got to sit down and do the risk-return analysis.
What do you think then, Simon, is there, sorry to interject, but just on that point, I mean, if you were looking at the risk of all of this, you would have to throw in the figure of, 99 point whatever it is, people won't die of this. So is there a risk factor based on hospitalizations and being able to cope? Is it based on the fact that, okay, even if you don't die, it's still going to be deeply unpleasant for a good percentage of people? What would that risk factor be based on? Because it wouldn't be based on death.
I agree with you, and I think the risk would actually be one level below that. So if I were the government, I would say I may not publicly want to say this, but I may believe actually the risk of mass deaths, millions of people dying of this, is minimal. That's not the real risk. The real risk is, if we don't force people to have vaccines, basically the whole economy shuts down. We don't have people going to offices, we don't have people going to factories, we don't manufacture goods to export. The financial hit to the wealth of this nation would be catastrophic if that were to continue, say, for 2 or 3 years, let alone 12 or 18 months. The financial implication of this country being made so much poorer as a result of that would mean we would not be able to give the social benefits to people. We wouldn't be able to pay unemployment benefit. We wouldn't be able to fund the NHS. We wouldn't be able to fund the education system. You roll forward the implications of that through shutting down the economy for years and years because we allow COVID to linger for longer than it might do, then that risk is far, far greater, I think, than impeding on people's individual freedoms to say, I don't like the government telling me what I will or will not inject into my body.
Got it. It's a great call. Simon, thank you for that. I love the fairly intelligent way that he laid that out about the risk factor, even if you ferociously disagree with what he was saying. It's an interesting take on it. You want to challenge that? 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. It's Ian Collins on Talk Radio. The time is 1:45.